Let's get into it. First thing we want to do, we want to get that front wheel up off the ground so that there's no weight on it. These 1100s like to sit on their rear wheel. Unlike the new 1200, 1250s, they all sit on their front wheels. So with it being up like this, if you're lucky enough to have a center stand, throw it on the center stand. And then whether it's the rear peg mount, whether it's your luggage rack here, I didn't want to mount here because I'm worried about it hitting the mirror. Just something on either side to strap it down, to pull it down to the rear tire. Obviously this rear tire is touching the lift here. So with that strapped down and in place, the front wheel can move freely and it's ready to be taken off. First thing we need to do, take a 6 mil Allen. Let's loosen the pinch bolt. And come in here and just loosen her up. We don't need to remove it. We're just going to take the tension off of it. And once we do that, we're going to pull our 17 millimeter. That's going to be for the axle nut. Let's go ahead and remove that altogether. Break it loose. I'm going to leave it right here. That way I don't misplace it. I know where it's at. I put it down right where I took it out at. Next thing we're going to take is our 8 millimeter Allen. And we're going to remove the mounts, the bolts that mount on the caliper. Just going to loosen them up. I'm going to come around to the other side and I'm going to get those as well. And then I can just remove them by hand. You really don't need power tools for any of this stuff. As long as you use a breaker bar, you're not going to have to struggle at all. Now when these go to come off, there isn't a whole lot of space. You may need to spread the pads just a little bit to get them out. Notice I'm keeping all the bolts together. That way, if for some reason I'm unsure as to where they go back at, I have a general location as to where I took them out at. On bigger jobs, that's a little bit more important when you have nuts, bolts, and all kinds of different sizes everywhere, and you have a problem remembering where they all go. This job, that's not that big of a deal. All right. Got the mounting bolts out. Now let's get the caliper off. All right, now on these particular brake calipers, there is a very tight tolerance between the rim and the caliper itself. Lo and behold, I end up taking just a little bit of a flathead screwdriver, coming in the bottom here and just twisting a little bit to create a little bit of space. As you can tell, this has been off quite a few times. There's just a slight amount of space there to get it in and out of. But when you take your time, it comes out and it's free. I'm just going to let this sit here for now. I'm going to go around and get the other side. Here I am on the other side. Don't have the speedo cable to deal with, but it's still a very tight tolerance. What I like to do sometimes is just pull on that a little bit. I'm not worried about my rims. They're as aged as they're going to be right now. Clearly, you do want to take your time. If you want to tape that up, that'd be fine too. At this point, at the age my bike is, it's a 96. I'm not too worried about it. But you always want to take care, especially if you're doing this to a customer bike. As you can see, it's free and clear. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to go ahead and throw a bungee around it. And I'm going to come up and I'm going to grab a hold of something up top here just for it to take the weight off of the caliper. I don't want the weight of the caliper to be pulling on these lines. These have already been replaced. They blew out on me a few years ago because they just aged out. They happen over time. They degrade. It's rubber with brake fluid on it, in it. It happens. These are fairly new. I'm not too worried about it, but it's always a good habit to do irregardless. As you can see, that's resting up against the fender right here. Clearly this is my bike. I'm not too worried about it, but if it was a customer's bike or if it was a bike that doesn't have any blemishes on it whatsoever, a good idea is to just grab a shop rag and put it in between there. That way, if it's gonna rub up against anything, it's gonna rub up against the rag. I've had other guys, especially on, let's say, cruiser chrome rims, they'll take some, the perfect example is Crown Royal. They come in a nice little cloth bag. What they'll do, they'll save those bags and they'll wrap the calipers in it and then just tie it off. That way, there's always something between metal and rim. That's going to be your preference. I'm not too worried about my rims, but it's always something to be cognizant of. Let's continue. So I was editing the video and I realized I left out a pretty important step, or at least a admission, something that I probably should have brought up. I leave the brake pads in the caliper, and I'm going to show you why. I've always done it this way. Clearly it's going to make it easier to take the pads out. Keyword is if you can get the pads out easily. Let me show you. Right here is the pin that holds the brake pads in, coming through here. Don't mess with any of this. This holds the caliper together. What we're working with is right here. It's a little deceiving. It's got a flat head. You can sit here and screw and screw and screw until your little heart desires. It's gonna do nothing. That's just to help turn it to get the hole lined up, which I will show you in just a minute. If we look at the left side caliper from the back side, we got this little hole right here. What we're gonna do is put our punch in and knock it out from the back side. But we're gonna do it on this caliper. One other note that I realized when I was coming apart with this before I started recording was I'm missing the locking pin in here. So I will show you that as we come back out. But first, let's get this pin out. I'm going to go ahead and go to the other side real quick. I'm going to get on the back side of that pin. Just give it a couple little tappy tap taps. And as you can see, it knocked it out just enough for me to grab a hold of it. I'm going to use my needle nose to get that out of there. There's little springs on the brake pads themselves that kind of hold onto this rod. So it may be a bit difficult to get it out, but you just give it a little wiggle, wiggle, little shake, shake, it'll come out. Now, any of the new brake pads, brake calipers on new bikes, you're done. You just pull the brake pads out. But these guys are in here so tight that it is darn near impossible to get these things to drop out. So, at the very least, we're going to unmount one and loosen the other, just to get this caliper to move around a little bit, see if we can't get this to fall out. And I've already done this once, so you can see it's not just wanting to come out. It is not as easy as it should be. It should be stupid easy because we've already got all the things holding it in place out. So I'm going to pull that out all together, move it over, get it out of the way, do what I can. Eventually I'll get this guy to drop out. As you can see, for something that we're not replacing, more effort than it should be. I'm telling you that right now. Give it another little wiggle wiggle. There we go. I got the one out. Look at that. That's a shape if I ever saw one. Now that we have the back side out, the front side has enough space to clear it a whole lot easier. And look, that guy just fell out into my hand. Once that happens, this easily comes out. If you look in here, it comes in, and that little rod right there kind of holds them in place. It goes up against there. And then you can continue on with the tire and wheel removal. But I wanted to show you that just because some people are looking at it like, why don't you just take the brake pads out? And I've never done that because it's just a pain in the tail. Because the pads have got to kind of go back in before we get it all mounted, which on all the new bikes is not the case. So let's go back in with these. If you're not confident in taking brake pads off and putting them back on, try the other way that I'm doing it in this video, just because it keeps everything in place. The only thing you need to worry about is keeping them spread when you put them back onto the rotor, which is a challenge in and of itself, but a different type of challenge. All right, so putting that in place before we go over the rotor. And then all we have to do is we're gonna push it up against the rotor to create as much space as possible behind it for the other pad. God bless. There, we kind of got the push up into place. So what I'm going to do is just throw these bolts in. Where's my other one? There it is. Just to hold the caliper in place, and then push these up into place as much as possible. I'm holding it with my fingers right here, and then with my other hand I'm going to come in here. And something to note before I put this back in, there's a hole. Go on, focus. There's a hole in this pin. That's what this flathead is for, and I'll show you why in just a minute. What we're gonna do, we're kind of, again, getting it up into place. See, the back pad just fell out of place. Give it just a little wiggle wiggle, because you got some springs on the pads themselves. So you got to kind of wiggle wiggle to get it through that. All right, now it's through both pads, but you can see it's not in all the way. You don't need to hit it hard. It's not something that requires a whole lot of force, just a little persuasion. So what I'm going to do, and you're wondering why I'm using this side, because this side's wider. There we go. I felt it bottom out. We're going to let that go for now. Run these in. All right, let's see if I can get this on camera. In here, there's that pin that we just put in. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take my little flathead and I'm just gonna turn it until I can see that hole right there. And let me show you what that hole right there is for. On a side that actually has the pin that it's supposed to. I will definitely be purchasing one of those. See this pin right here? That holds this pin right here. That holds that from coming out. So as much as you had to kind of tap this pin in there, this locks it in place. And that little hole holds it in place. So no matter how much it tries to come out, that pin's going through it. So once again, that hole right there should have a pin in it. And it will as soon as I order it and get it in. Because that is your brake pad, you don't mess around with that. All right, I hope that shows you the other technique of doing this. It's not something I practice very often because, like I said, I don't know if I've replaced but 2 pads on any of these bikes. I think they're thick and they just don't get used as much. But that's how you do that. I wanted to include that in the video because I realized that I missed it. Don't forget to torque that back down, but you'll see that later in the video. All right. Now that we got the calipers off, we're safe to break this loose. You might be wondering why I use a breaker bar on something that doesn't have that high of a torque. It helps keep everything at a 90-degree angle, which means there's less of a chance that you're going to round a nut off. Not only that, but use a breaker bar, it takes less effort. Why struggle when you don't need to? So now that we have this loose, we're ready to pull the axle out. I've got what I call a special tool at my disposal, and I'll show you. This is just a rubber wedge. It actually came off of a BMW bike years ago. I bet nobody can really guess what this went to. What I'm gonna do is slide it underneath just to keep pressure against it so that the wheel doesn't go to fall down once I take the axle out. And there's one other thing that I want to tell you guys about. I've got this flathead right here. This is what I affectionately call the FU flathead. And we all have one. We've all got a flathead that we don't use as a flathead. And this particular flathead, as you can see, it is not straight anymore, has been with me for a very long time. And I've used it for the exact same thing that I'm going to show you for right now. It fits through these holes. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn it, since it's all loose, I'm going to stick it in here. Now this axle's ready to pull out. I'm going to take on either side, hold the tire, and just work my way back and forth. As you can see, I've got a handle on it right here. There's a washer here that's going to fall off, or a spacer, we'll call it a spacer. It's going to fall out. Just remember where that goes when we go back together with it. There it goes. And here's the axle. It's not falling anywhere because I got my hand on it. I actually think I'm going to throw some grease on that while I got it out. Here's the washer that goes on the right-hand side, throttle side, right there. It's going to be a little bit of a trick to get that back in there when we go back together. Let me show you this other side. Now right here, this is ready to come out. And it's sitting on the ground. We've got this is the speedo cable right here. This can just swing out of the way. Let's put a bungee on my brake caliper over here as well to keep it out of the way. Now that the speedo cable's out of the way. It doesn't need to be pulled that much, just enough to keep the weight off of the hose itself. Now, depending on how your lift is set up, it can roll right out, or you might have to drop it out. All I'm going to tell you is the sensor right here. This is your speed sensor if you have ABS. Just keep in mind that you don't want to be banging up against that. Just take your time and it'll roll straight out. As you can see, there it goes. And that's all it takes. It's just a couple bolts, a little bit of technique, and you can have it out. let's go over just a few things before we go back together. All right, here's your speedometer, at least the wheel side. You've got these two little dogs right here. And what they do, they spin with the wheel, and that's how you get the speed up on your dashboard. Now it's incredibly important that you see these two right here. Let's zoom in a little bit right there. You've got these two right here. This doesn't move. That side does. So what you want to do, you want to make sure these are on opposite sides of the two that are on the speedometer. And what that's going to do, that's going to spin, and that's where you get your speed from. So you got a spot here, or tab, and a tab, and then you've got a tab and a tab. So make sure these tabs don't go in the same spot or take up the same real estate as those tabs. So let's call this 3 and 9 o'clock. You want the other tabs at 12 and 6. That's important. You definitely don't want to torque that back down with those tabs not in the right spot. This is plastic, that's metal. This will give out before that does. Let's go ahead and get this wheel back in. Depending on what your lift is set up like, you may be able to just roll it in like this, or you may have to pull the drop out, depending on how your lift is set up. So I'm just going to lightly set it in there right now. The biggest thing that I'm wanting to do right now, before anything else, is get the speedo in place. It's going to be a little tricky, only because you're going to need to set it in place and then go back over to the other side, because we need that slack to be able to set it in there. So we're just going to put it there and not move it that much. Easier said than done, I know. Now we're going to come back over here. I'm going to leave this open right here so you can see where the spacer needs to go. That's this guy. Just like this right here. Now he doesn't like to stand. They don't normally stay in there like that. They don't like to stay in. So what I'll do is get the axle started and then through there so it holds it. I'm going to just get to as far as I can and then come back over here and make sure it's lined up, which it's not. And here's the next little bit of detail that I need to show you. There is a tab right here. I'm touching the tab right there. There is a slot in your speedometer for it to sit, and that keeps it from spinning once it's on there. You want to make sure that's lined up. So a little bit of a difficulty right here is keeping this in line, keeping that in line, and getting the axle through all at once. It can be a little tricky. First 2 times you do it. Once you get it down, it's not too bad. You can see over here, the axle is completely bottomed out. It's where it needs to be at. So let's double check all that moving around. Make sure it's where it needs to be at as well. Right there, you can see it's in between the 2 little slots there, which means this guy is not going to be rotating. It's in the spot that it needs to be at. We did good. Now we're ready to move on. All right, so since the right-hand side was the second side that we took off, it's going to be the first side that we put back on. I'm going to remove the bungee. I'm going to bring it around in here and get it as flat as possible. I might grab me that flathead just to make sure that the pads are spread out where they need to be at. If I told you that they are a tight fit. If you feel confident in spreading the pads out completely, that would be another good option. As you can see, they slide in. And just for giggles, I'm going to go ahead and start the bolts just to hold them in place. We're not torquing them yet. All right, let's head to the other side. All right, let's give this side a try. Let's see how much it fights us. Get the pads on the opposite side. Now, as you can see, or maybe not because the camera isn't lined up correctly, that brake line is up against that fender. And what we're trying to do is slide it on. So now you see where all that rubbing is coming from. I'm not too worried about my fender, but that's something you need to be aware of. I think I missed that whole thing putting it back on there. But you got to see the other side. Same, except we got the speedo cable on this side. Throwing some bolts in there, but once again, we're not torquing anything. And why are we not torquing anything yet? Because we're going to torque that axle first. Definitely want to make sure your axle is torqued correctly and without any obstruction, because you want that wheel to stay on. Speaking of axle, we're going to go ahead and throw that in there. All right, we're going to do one last check. Our pinch bolts are loose. Right, loose. You got the spot lined up here. We've got both of our calipers on, left and right. Now we're ready to torque. Next thing we're going to do is move this out of here. Make sure that spins unobstructed, which it does. All right, let's go get the torque wrench. All right, before we torque that axle, one little piece of advice. Note this little screwdriver that I told you about earlier. We all noticed how bent that was, correct? I'm going to show you why. This hole you want horizontally. It's going to be the easiest way to do what we need to do. We're going to take it, put it through there. Put it about halfway. Right about there is good. Something that you can hold on to. We're going to come back over here. If you missed it earlier, the axle nut is a 17 millimeter. You can't see that. 17 millimeter. Right on there. Millimeters. We're not doing standard. This is millimeters. It's German bike. And this is going to be in Newton meters. That axle nut is going to be 30 Newton meters. So let's turn on our torque wrench. And go bring it on down to 30. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to be holding on this side with my hand, and over here I'm going to be torquing it. Not torquing, torquing. That's loosening. That's tightening. All right, starting to tighten up. See, I'm holding it over here. And 2 for good measure. All right, that's all that takes. But that's why having something like this is important. You can use a punch, but if it bends it, you don't want a bent punch. This guy right here, I've had him for years. If he breaks, I'm getting another one. Let's move on to the pinch bolts. Those are 6mm Allen. Those guys are 22 Newton meters. What I like to do, these guys are loose. There's one side. And the other side. Last but not least, we've got the brake calipers. Brake calipers get torqued to 40 Newton meters. I'm gonna go ahead and just run these bolts in by hand. Honestly, you could use a electric drill or anything else. The only thing I don't like about the impacts is you don't want to run it in too hard and put it to over what the torque is. So it's not going to hurt it doing it by hand. I know you might be in a hurry, but you're not saving that much time. All right, 40 Newton meters. There's one side. There's the other. One and two. Anybody think of anything I forgot? Anything I should do? Anything that I was messing with that needs to be checked? If someone said, check your brakes, you're correct. I was sitting there trying to spread them out so I can get them off the wheel. Check this out. It goes all the way to the handlebar because I spread them out so it pushed some of the fluid away from the brake pads. So we're gonna pump it back up. That's 3 full pumps. Imagine you pulling it off the lift and you go to grab a handful of brake. This isn't a heavy bike, but still, that's not the point. Check that. So, now that I checked it, look, they work. Now, something else I like to do that some people don't care about. I threw grease on the axle, like I said I was going to. I'm going to remove all the excess grease that's spread out when I put it in there. Why? Grease on the axle where it's moving and when it's sliding in and out is great. But grease anywhere else that you don't need it is going to attract dirt and grime and dust. So while grease is great where you need it, anywhere that doesn't need it is just going to attract dirt. So clean it up. That way it doesn't look dirty and everything else once you start riding down the road. Now that we got that taken care of, straps can come off. Let's do the other side. And we're ready to go. Last thing I need to try and show you, I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera, but clearly if you're in here working, it's going to be a little bit easier to do, is the ABS ring gap from the sensor to the ring itself. BMW specification is 0.45 to 0.55 millimeters. So I've got my little feeler gauges here, and we're just going to slide them on up in there and see if it's a go, no go. That's 0.45, that goes. And we're going to try 0.55. That's going to be a little loose. So what I'm thinking is I need to be able to take one or two of the little shims out there so that it has a better clearance, get it? So that between the sensor and the ring, it's closer so it can read better. That is how you check that. I'll have to go get me some shims. I have some shims around here somewhere, but you know how that is. The more stuff you hold on to, the harder it is to find stuff. So they're around here somewhere. If I find them, I'll show you what they look like. But that's checking sensor gap. It's checking between the head of the sensor and the ring itself. Every bike has a spec. You'll have to find out this bike, it's 0.45 to 0.55. All right, there you go.